Marriage 3.1. Where did the first 2 episodes of this, I'm Marrying a Family, trilogy come from? As a reminder. 1. The first episode was about the spread of my surname, Zastro, across 3 federal states, or 2 federal states, Schleswig-Holstein and Berlin, and an old GDR district, Neubrandenburg. It is surely no coincidence that most of my life so far has taken place in precisely these areas and still does to this day. I've only known for a few months that it's something special when a person's last name is contained in complete letter order in a street name of a district or state capital. For example, the name Bach in Simbacher Straße in Saarbrücken, but certainly also in some other state capitals in the form of Johann Sebastian Bach Straße or something similar. The capital of a person's birth district or state is always important for high scorer status from birth. Such status is simply copied to the spouse upon marriage, regardless of whether the name is found on a street in the spouse's birth capital or not. As long as the marriage lasts and the original street still exists, both spouses will have high scorer status. Many networks are currently being built, especially by the German armed forces and the federal police, etc., because these young officials completely naively believe that by getting married they will simply change their status from normal to high and continue living exactly as before. Only, by doing so, they are giving the high nobility significantly more points so that they can better secure their selfish goals. But that's something different. A high scorer is immediately tortured much more and literally sucked dry by the automatic software. The computer pulled on him like a swarm of greedy mosquitoes. Good luck. It's important for these people that they get divorce immediately after marriage so that things continue these ways. Therefore, their newly acquired name must also be on a street in the capital of their birth. Then you've done it. It can't be a coincidence that I've been almost only in Zastro districts and federal states. Kiel, Berlin, and the city of Neubrandenburg with Zastro streets. But I didn't know that. I'm currently trying to get rid of the name through marriage. Of course, I have to make sure that the new one is not on a Kiel street. Because the best thing is actually a quick double shot of wedding and divorce. After the divorce, you no longer have to decide on your old name. This is only asked once and then it's final. So always check your own capital city very carefully, even after the progression. This is almost more important than the short marriage and its status. Of course, with a real marriage of love, things look different. Everything is logical and simple, as already explained, even with the children. But certainly not always easy worldwide. It's hardly possible to predict what new streets will be named. But you can pretty certainly rule out that the funniest, most SHOAROUS, and most melodic foreign names will become local capital streets. Anyone WHO knows my videos and has subscribed to my 3 channels knows that there are still the sinus and vector rules. They only apply to natural or acquired super high scores. The following occupational groups are very often excluded individually or collectively: teachers, educators, therapeutic educators, nurses, doctors, theater actors, classical orchestra musicians, pilots, flight attendants, and sailors. The reason is the risk of taking pills or resorting to weapons due to constant stress and fear of failure. Then either soldier or police officer are often excluded. Note: this only applies to all super high sinus and vector victims coming from one federal state. Here, it's made difficult for barracks-contained groups to marry even in the middle of their service contracts, according to the avalanche principle. As I said, they don't know what it means to be a high scorer. Especially not a super high scorer. The long reach for these reserves means that points are scarce among the high nobility. So the lemons are squeezed mercifully. The 2 high-ranking groups are considered the king's property and are never free. The ordinary ones are. 2. The second episode of the trilogy shows a desired additional profit through electoral districts or federal states that are suitable for them. The marriage of a larger family whose children from previous marriages, even in the special situation of state reform due to reunification with the GDR, all became high scorers by newly acquiring the surname Zastro upon marriage to their mothers. And it stayed there after the mother's divorce, as long as everyone keeps the new name. It can then be passed on easily, especially in the area, after divorce. Not only does it sound completely sick, it's also very inexperienced to simply impose this heavy burden on yourself. The moral failure of abuse of the concept of marriage apparently doesn't matter in this emergency anyway. And enough thought was certainly put in. But there is inevitably a lack of experience, what it feels to be a blazed, empty lemon. I do not recommend it under any circumstances. Kings have never been grateful or appreciated for sacrificing subject. This is the result of a pseudo-romantic and pseudo-just fantasy of submission. The self-perception of the high nobility is mostly based on the fact that these families must have executed themselves like predators in their time. Merciless and cold. The more sympathetic the opponent is, the more sadism is added. What would bother me most if I shot Bootlux in the back of the head, so that the blood would have to be licked off by new Bootlux and we would never get done here and today. So much about that. Hundreds of thousands of Jews fought on the German side in the First World War to the point of surrender, and became victim of Operation Reinhardt from the end of 1939. Merciless and calculated. If the total score is 20-45, then these people will have the right to use the house and the radio systems forever. Of course, it's often said that an 85% population reduction represents an optimal threat scenario. Only 15% are expected to survive after the seizure of power. That's roughly equivalent to the secret brotherhoods or the Stasi. So all citizens would work like crazy in the final stretch, possibly stabbing each other in the back. But the nobility loves nature, riding, and hunting. They only need a small number of slaves for production and research. The crazy thing is that these days almost everything in the world exists and is there only so that this battle for points can be fighted here and now. The time span from around 1948 to 2045 is simply too long and the technology too good for wild growth to still exist. People were just functional robots, mentally and physically exhausted and hopeless. Reproud and annoying. Garbage can forte rapid. Not too slimly dosed for almost everyone, and so cleverly distributed that the 15% WHO already knew what was going on, separated it, and contributed strategically. Don't have to play the mass gravediggers here as well. The 85 will have to bury each other. All clear. Let us free yourself from DreamWorks regarding recognition, honor, thanks. These are effective elements in the final battle. Veterans. No thanks. The sooner we can rule out a final victory for the nobility by marrying down to normal and using other methods, the more elegant and smooth the transition to the CIA will be. They also know how to govern and warn superbly and mega clearly about the dangerous future. The CIA is using me as a mouthpiece, and this is the result. That was the final part of the trilogy. I'm marrying a family. Hey, ho, let's go.